Years had passed. David's house was full. Sons, daughters, the next generation of Israel's royal line. Among them, a beautiful princess named Tamar. But Amnon, the king's firstborn, looked at his half-sister Tamar with a desire that had no place in a righteous heart, and it consumed him. His friend Jonadab devised a scheme. Pretend to be sick. Ask for Tamar to come and care for you. A plan whispered in the dark, and David agreed to it. Tamar came without suspicion, a sister caring for her brother. She baked bread with her own hands, kindness, walking willingly into a trap. What happened next is difficult to describe. Tamar pleaded with Amnon, begging him to reconsider, but her cries fell on deaf ears. Consumed by his own desires, he forced his will upon her. In that devastating moment, a sacred trust was destroyed, innocence was lost, and a wound was inflicted that would forever change the course of David's family. And then he hated her, cast her out like nothing. Tamar tore her royal robe, put ashes on her head, and wept in the corridor, utterly alone. When King David heard what had happened to Tamar, he was furious. Anger filled his heart, yet no justice came, and no punishment was given. But David was not the only one listening. Tamar's brother Absalom heard everything. Though he remained silent, his grief and anger grew stronger each day. In the shadows, a desire for revenge began to take root. 2 years passed. Tamar lived in seclusion, her life shattered, and Absalom said nothing. But he never forgot. He waited. Then Absalom invited all the king's sons to a feast, sheep shearing at his estate. David could not attend, but he sent Amnon. The feast was joyful. Wine flowed freely. Amnon drank without fear, and Absalom quietly gave his servants one final, deadly command. Then, at Absalom's command, the moment finally came. His servants moved swiftly, and Amnon was struck down. 2 years of silence, grief, and hidden anger ended in a single act of vengeance. As chaos erupted at the feast, the king's other sons fled in terror, fearing they would be next. A messenger ran to Jerusalem with terrifying news. At first, it was feared all the king's sons were dead. David tore his robe and fell to the ground. But it wasn't all of them. Only Amnon was dead. David's other sons returned in tears, and in that moment, he knew the truth. Absalom had done this, and Absalom had fled. Absalom fled to Geshur, his mother's homeland, and stayed there 3 years. A son in exile, a father in mourning, a throne left waiting. 3 years passed. David's heart longed for Absalom, even after everything. A father's love, even for a son who had done the unthinkable. Absalom was allowed to return to Jerusalem, but David refused to see his face. So close to reconciliation, and yet a wall remained between them. Finally, David called for Absalom. He bowed low, and the king embraced his son with tears. A reunion at last. But not everything was healed. Absalom began to build something of his own. Chariots, runners, charm that won every heart in Jerusalem. A prince becoming more popular than the king. Every morning at the city gate, Absalom listened to the people's complaints and quietly told them the king had failed them. he was stealing a nation's heart. Then, the trumpet sounded in Hebron. Absalom is king.
Absalom is king in
that
Hebron!
built for years sprang to life across all of Israel in a single night. David fled his own city, barefoot, weeping, climbing the Mount of Olives with his head covered, driven from his throne by his own son. Absalom entered Jerusalem in triumph and sat on his father's throne. The crowd cheered, but for one flickering moment, even he seemed to feel its weight. Civil war had come. As his army marched out to fight his own son's forces, David gave one desperate order: deal gently with the young man, for my sake. The battle raged in the forest of Ephraim, and then Absalom's hair caught in the branches of a great tree, leaving him hanging, helpless, alone. Joab found him there, and against the king's command struck him down. The rebellion ended in that tree. Absalom, son of David, was dead. David waited at the city gate. A runner appeared on the horizon, and the king asked only one question: is the young man Absalom safe?
Is the young man Absalom safe?
The messenger hesitated, then spoke, and David's face changed. Hope, realization, and then the kind of grief that has no bottom. David went up to his chamber and wept. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son, my son Absalom. Would God I had died for thee." A king's victory, a father's ruin. The kingdom was restored. David's throne stood secure once more. But some victories cost everything. Some thrones are won at the price of a son.